So today we start this project development, and I'm more or less going to show how to make a working project during the class. So this will happen today and tomorrow and possibly next week as well. It depends how fast the things are going. And last year, really, I have been getting comments from students that these applications that we are building were quite basic, even though I didn't consider them really that basic, but they were saying that could we learn something about research also at the course. So the reason why this year we are going to do this wind-free router, or however we are going to call it, is because it links to research as well. So when I was now at this conference just a week ago, many people were using context to do routing or to help people that are moving along. Some applications there were avoiding or trying to enhance, to optimize in some way the amount of daylight or shadow, anyway, different type of applications. And I want to do the same, but using the wind. So when is wind not nice, more or less, when you're walking around and maybe you want to avoid strong wind if the weather is like that. Sometimes wind can be good. Maybe you're cycling and you want to avoid front wind, but you want to maximize tailwind or something like that. So I don't know exactly what we are going to build here, but I know that today we are going to start to put building blocks together, to implement building blocks, and then we will have some kind of application one way or another. So either one that tells you where to go to avoid the wind, or maybe one that says where are the windy regions in your trajectory, or something along those lines. So any questions here? Is this interesting? Is this okay? Right. So today we are going to start with last week's source code from this Superman guy on the Google map. So I'm going to open that and remove parts of the things that we don't need. I'm just going to keep the fact that it uses a Google map and maybe some marker handling there. Okay. So title is going to be something like that. And here, all right, the Superman guy was also being affected by the wind. I did that ahead of time, so if the wind is blowing in some direction, he will slightly be slowed down or sped up or moved north to the north or to the south, depending on the direction. So I'm going to keep here this weather API information because most likely we are going to need it. We will not need this interval about for moving the cursor, so this is just some animation that we did there, but maybe this code here would be a little bit useful still, so I'm going to keep it there. And then get weather in the city. Okay, this will need a little bit update, so I don't want to get the weather in a city given by coordinates because I will want the weather where the trajectory is going to be, and it's much easier to give it in terms of coordinates instead of the name of the city. So this will need a little bit update. And then, okay, here we have a GET request. So this HTTP GET request was sent to the weather API. I'm going to remove it from here because I made a JS directory here on the right, and I separated all the requests, the GET requests and the POST requests here. So what I'm going to do is I just remove that, and I'm going to add here external script. Something like that. And now probably the application still works. Let's check it out. I'm gonna refresh the page here and open also the console. No errors, and oh yes, the weather information is here. So I'm going to try to zoom in on this. So the weather information was there, and the wind, the degrees, so the direction where the wind is coming from, and also the wind speed is a given. And I believe it was set to this global variable here. Let's see. Yes, so when the weather is obtained, this global variable, I'm going to mark it with capital letters. It's easier to, I usually don't do it like that, but it's easier to keep track of global variables. So more or less that means that if I refresh the page now and I'm going to type here wind, I can have the data because it loads immediately when the page is starting, and we don't necessarily need maybe a preloader for this. Of course, you can have it, but before a user is going to zoom in or find a place where he is interested, most likely we will get this information from somewhere. So I do want to indicate the wind direction at some point, maybe have an arrow like in this mock-up pointing how the wind is going. So whenever the wind becomes available, the wind info, I am going to display it somehow like that. So not just speed 2.1 and degrees 60, because this is very counterintuitive for the users.
The degrees are just normal degrees on a circle from 360?
Let's go to the Open Weather map. I think I did check last time. It's complicated. Much more complicated than what it should be. Or, well, what computer scientist understands from the degrees, but so in degrees it's a meteorological degree, and I assume from Wikipedia it means a wind blowing from the north has a wind direction of 0 degrees or 360. So that means more or less, so this means 0. Okay, what else? Wind blowing from the east, 90 degrees. So this thing here is 90 degrees. And then I'm assuming now southern wind is going to be a 180.
So it goes clockwise, not counterclockwise.
Yeah. Now it depends if you consider where is it coming from or where is it going.
Oh yeah.
You can have, it can be a little bit confusing, but I think that plotting this now with the arrows is going to avoid some of the confusion and help with the debugging. Sometimes it's useful to take a while and do this. So let's see, is 270 wind blowing from the west. Okay. And from the south 180. So it seems this is the case. if this meteorological means the same definition from there. Of course, you can really debug this very quickly and check it compared to some real weather websites, see what the wind is like, and do a checking there. Okay, but since we are here, let's also modify our function. So instead of calling it by city name, I'm going to call it by geographic coordinates here. So the API call for geographic coordinates is going to have this format instead. I'm going to go back into the code where this function is defined, and something strange happened. Okay. And I'm going to say get, okay. Okay. My computer is going crazy again. Get weather at location, and here I'm going to say location as a parameter. So what did it look like? It was latitude and longitude are the parameters, the get parameters there. So not anymore this Q here, but something like this. Most likely this will mean I have to concatenate with the latitude component from there. Let's align this a little better. And same goes for the longitude. So this should now work and get the weather information. Yeah, this city is not anymore important, but this app ID is important, so this is the API key that I'm getting, in this case is a global variable. So, okay, LNG. Typically I like to keep the variable names the same, but the problem now occurs that in Google Maps you have LNG, in Open Weather Map you have LON, so I would just recommend keep one, use it everywhere, and no need to adapt because it can become quite tedious to fix. So now I'm going to replace this get weather in the city with get weather at location, and the location is going to be, I have a global variable here where I have Joensuu coordinates as LAT, L, and G defined. So if I did everything correctly, reloading this page is going to still give me results, and they look the same. Plus, if I go and check these different, okay, it actually says here Joensuu, so the API is doing geocoding. Okay, so API doesn't do just the weather information, it even tells me the name of the city if I give it the coordinates. This is interesting, and I never noticed this before. Okay, but now, if you remember, I also presented this OSRM API for routing, so for getting directions from A to B. And we are going to use it today, but instead of calling it from this free demo link that they offered there, I'm going to call a different variant that is installed on the CS server and is accessible through our MOPSI API. So exactly this call is what I'm going to do, but I'm going to call it locally because we have no limitations on the number of routing requests that I can give there. So to do that, I need to make a new function. I'm going to call it get directions, and I'm going to say here maybe point A, point B. So to get directions from point A to point B, and this is important because if we go back to the mockup here, I want, given 2 points, maybe my location and another location, I want something to give me a way to go from A to B. So I'm going to try to draw this line here using the OSRM navigation instructions. So how would this look like? Well, first we need to access this MOPSI server. So I know the link of this API, even though it's not really an open API, we use it just internally. But here you will learn how to call it if needed. So, okay, and these are actually constant values. Since it is possible to use this, we should use it. So the address is going to be csuef.fi mopsi routes and server.php. So this is capable of giving me also directions in addition to some other things as well. And in our function here, we are going to make HTTP get an asynchronous request. So this one is going to need here a URL, and when it ends, when it completes, it's an asynchronous request, so it needs a callback function. So I'm going to define a new function on directions received. And this function, let's just output whatever the server gives us for now. Probably something like that. I'm going to output this into the console. And of course the URL is going to come from our MOPSI server. But then we need to concatenate here. So this is undefined API here. The parameter that I'm going to give to this GET request is going to be a JSON string that needs to encode that we want directions from point A to point B. So I'm going to define this param and I'm going to explain it to you. But again, this is what you usually see documented in places like this, for example. So the type of attributes and the type of values. We just don't have it there, but more or less, I think you will get the point. So it expects a request type attribute, and this request type is of the form get directions. And once this is received by the server, it's going to start to look for from where and to. So four attributes actually. The start latitude of the point. So this is going to be point A dot lat. We have it as a parameter. And start LNG is another attribute that the server expects, and this is the LNG attribute from our point. You can probably guess that the other ones are going to be end LAT and end LNG, but coming from point B this time. And one other attribute, I think it is default, but let's see. So what this means, I believe these are the other ones, not 100% sure. Car, or I think it's actually cycling, walking, driving, something like that. So if you install OSRM, this service on your home computer, it's not going to do anything unless you give it a map to work with, a road network. The road network that we installed came from OpenStreetMap. So we installed the OpenStreetMap road network, but once you give it a road network, a set of nodes and links that are creating this graph, it's going to work with it, no matter what. So if you're going to combine everything, if you're going to give it a combination of links for the car, for the walking, and for the cycling, it's going to give a mess. Like the directions are going to be a combination that you go with your car, then to a walking path or so on. So what we did is actually implemented 3 different servers. One giving to OSRM only the car roads, one only the cycling paths, and one only the walking paths. And every time you are going to specify this, what is happening is that a different instance of OSRM is going to start, depending on this attribute here. So let's see what happens. But first, I need 2 points. So I have now Joensuu. I'm going to go back here and get the coordinates from Kuopio. And to do that, I move the marker to Kuopio. And I write some code. So these are Kuopio coordinates. I'm going to keep just the meaningful ones. The meaningful part of the number. The others are a little bit too much. Okay, and now that I have this, I can say here get directions from Joensuu to Kuopio. So to see what are the roads that I need to take to get from one to the other. So I refresh the page and unknown operation. Okay, so I have some error here coming from the server. Yeah, I think I know. So the reason is that this is expecting a string JSON, so a JSON string, and I created here an object. So I'm going to put stringify here. This parameter object. Of course, I could have defined it as a string entirely, but it's much easier to make mistakes if you do that, like typos or here I'm using these point values. I would need to add some concatenations there, or it would become a little bit more difficult to implement in that way. Wow, so something is coming from here. Big string, some kind of street names are available. It tells me some duration. Not exactly sure what this duration is. Something. Distance, this looks realistic. So if this is in meters, it means 137 kilometers from Joensuu to Kuopio. Probably something here works. But where are the points? Like I want to draw this line from Joensuu to Kuopio that actually would follow some kind of road structure. And it's actually here under geometry but something is there. So the thing is, by default, this OSRM is going to not decode by default is going to be encoded as the geometry is going to be encoded as a polyline. And this is like, I don't know if it's base64 encoded version of the polyline or something, but it looks messy, like it looks unreadable. You can decode this polyline by writing some piece of code or checking, they have some code samples on the page. But what you can also do is tell it, I don't want it to be encoded. So you would encode it like this because it uses less space. So your bandwidth usage is going to be less. Otherwise, if I'm going to specify here that I want it to decode geometry, and I'm going to set this to true, then when I refresh the page, I'm going to get something like this. It looks a little bit more familiar now. So these coordinates are coming now as an array of points that I have to connect in order to move from Joensuu to Kuopio. So let's show them on the map. First, I need to parse this object. And let's log now this object after I parse it to see here in the string format, especially also with this escaping here, it can be quite hard to know the levels. So refresh. Okay, it's still a string for some reason. This is probably some kind of bug on Mopsy server. I think it's double encoded for some reason, so this can happen. You can re-encode as many times as you want, and it's just going to start escaping the columns. Okay, I'm going to parse it again. Something that to do fix on Mopsy server actually, but I'm worried to do that now because probably this service is used by many other people, and if they are double encoding for some reason and I'm going to remove one encoding, I'm going to break the code. So this needs to be thought about how to make it backwards compatible if I'm going to do this change. And most easy way to do it is to add here another parameter that says don't double encode or something like that. Then both of the things are supported. So I refresh the page here again, and okay, routes. The first route. So okay. This is something that you will find in the documentation if you read the OSRM documentation. It can actually give you alternative routes. So if you're going to ask from Joensuu to Kuopio, it may not give just the common route that goes like Viinijärvi, Outokumpu, Tuusniemi, Riistavesi, and so on, but you may get also the Varkaus alternative. So Varkaus is this down here. It's possible to go to Kuopio this way as well. So in this case we are getting just one. Probably it considers the other one as too long or whatever. But we should always get one item as a result. So I'm going to open the first route, its geometry and its coordinates, and that's going to give me the points. So let's see. I'm gonna take the coordinates as object routes. The first one, it's geometry and it's coordinates. And now I'm gonna debug just to make sure this is okay. So let's print out only the coordinates and refresh the page. Yeah, so this looks fine here. Now, one important thing to note is that these maybe are not in the order you expect them to be, and you can have quite many surprises if you don't debug. This is the longitude, and this is the latitude. So typically latitude and longitude are given in this order, but this service gives it in the other direction. Of course, all of these things are documented somewhere, so here you can see that the coordinates have a format of longitude, latitude, and so on. But if you are careless and if you are going to do it quickly, you will end up in Kazakhstan. That's where you end up if you invert the coordinates from Finland, more or less, from Joensuu. So surprises can happen. Okay, but now I'm going to use this code that I didn't remove and actually create a path using these coordinates and put it on the map. So what Superman was leaving behind there I'm going to reuse and assign these coordinates from here. So to do that, I actually have to go through all elements. And for each coordinate, let's say we have here an array, so this empty array, it's going to get a new element, the ith coordinate, and the latitude is the second thing, and the longitude is the first thing. I really hate it when first means 0 and second means 1, but I believe you understand what I mean. It's funny how something like a programming language can make you say, of course 1 means 2. This is really what is happening, and everybody in this room is probably, yeah, this is okay sometimes. But, of course, there was in mathematics a long time when 0 was not a number. I mean, 0 was invented at some point, and then the question comes, is it the first number or but yeah, okay. So the polyline path needs to look like this, needs to be an array with LAT, LNG objects. So this is from the Google Maps documentation, it's something we checked last time, and I'm going to put the results that are coming from OSRM, from MOPSI server, in this polyline that is already defined. So I'm going to set its path. And now hopefully we are going to get something here. We actually do get something here. I'm going to make it opaque. So now this is made to be transparent, but it's not very visible here. So I'm going to make it opaque, and let's make it blue. So it's better visible compared to that. So you see you have the path from Joensuu to Kuopio there. The quality of the path looks a little strange. Like here it's not following the road. You could think that, okay, maybe OpenStreetMap is not so precise here. But this is not actually the case. So if I'm going to open MOPSI, I can demonstrate also how OpenStreetMap looks like. And we do have here the parts where we actually call this API. So here we have the bicycle, car, and walking modes. I can put the car mode, for example. It looks like this. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same call that I did just now, and you can kind of see same result here, like not following exactly the roads. If I put the OpenStreetMap layer, you can see it's quite similar to the Google, but for some reason it doesn't give you all the details. Now, very interesting thing, if I move these points here, something happened here, and if I'm gonna move the other point here to the other endpoint of that more or less straight path, you will see that this path starts to resemble more and more what is in the road networks, what is in OpenStreetMap's tiling system. So the pictures that are being loaded by OpenStreetMap. So this indicates to me, even though I couldn't find anywhere in the documentation, that they are using polygonal approximation, so that I'm not going to get at the higher distances, like at the higher zoom levels, the information between every possible turning point. So you can note here that even though there are no turning points, the network still gives you geometric information, like that this road is curving to some extent. There are no turns possible here, but a point is needed to encode this turning point. The good thing is that for our application, we don't really need to worry about this. We could fix it. We could take the points and then do more requests between every 2 points until we get some kind of accurate enough result. We could even implement this server side so that we don't send many requests, but just one that gives us the detail. But we are worried about navigating in city environments and walking. So with walking, we're not going to go hundreds of kilometers where this is happening. This kind of small effect is happening. And walking or cycling is going to happen more or less on the city level. And here, we don't encounter this problem at all. So in our case, we actually don't need to worry about this effect, because we will not care how much the wind is blowing from Joensuu to Kuopio. Of course, under extreme cases, maybe you rent a car from somewhere, it gives you some consumption, but because the wind is blowing against you, you will use more gas and then you have to pay more or whatever, but this is way overthinking it. So this is good enough, the directions that we are gonna get from that. Okay, any questions so far about what we did now? Is it confusing or clear or both? Okay, so this Superman guy is nice here, but I'm going to replace him with something much less interesting that looks like that. And I'm going to teach you some more tricks about how to use Google Maps. I don't want to use external images, so I'm not going to make a PNG with a black circle A there, or yeah, I'm going to try to use symbols instead of icons. So these symbols in Google Maps are more or less the same as SVG format, but you can define it inside the marker object. So giving it to the marker objects constructor there. I don't remember how to do it, but I'm gonna use this circle. It's already defined. I don't need to, it's a constant here, so it's a value that is a constant. It will make this circle, but if you check this page, you can see that instead of giving such a constant, you can give this kind of thing, and this is an inline representation of an SVG file, and probably it will look somehow. To look like this stuff. So you can actually make these different different shapes, but I'm not going to do anything so complicated. Also, you can notice here the colors, like the yellow and the gold that the star was appearing like. I'm just going to use this circle from here. So I'm going to take as an icon, instead of this image, I'm going to put this piece of code here, and very often you get warning if you have a comma after the last element. It's one of the reasons for errors, and I don't remember how hard it is to debug, but it can be. Okay, but since we are still here, I am going to cheat a little bit and get some more properties from this gold star, because I want my circle to look a little bit different than here. Or, I don't know. Let's see how it looks like first. Well, I want it to be a little thinner, maybe the line. So I'm going to do something here. I'm going to say, I'm going to copy this star format from there, and I'm going to modify it. I'm going to say I want the fill color to be white, opacity 0.8, so you can see through it, but not like really well. It's going to be more or less white. Scale, okay, the stroke weight, so this probably means how thick I want this line to be. I'm gonna try to make it 8, and this stroke color, let's leave it to black. Refresh the page. Very small marker. It's not gonna be good at all if I'm gonna have a mobile screen. So if I'm gonna have a mobile screen like this, this marker is silly. So yeah, I need to take care of it. This scale is very small. Maybe I put here 8 as well. Refresh the page. A bit better, but no. Well, starts to become a bit visible. You also have to notice that the circle is not changing size if I am zooming in. This is very different if compared to if you would use the circle object from Google Maps. So here I'm drawing this polyline. I can, for the trajectory, I can also draw circles and other things like that. This polyline is linked to the locations, and a circle can be linked to the locations, and it does get bigger and bigger when you're zooming in, but the symbol stays the same. So bigger still. Let's make the stroke weight also bigger. Okay, now it kind of looks like I can drag it and also read it. On the main page, it looks ridiculously large here. But now the question is, do you want to optimize for small screens or not? I mean, this would work on the small screen, but something like this. Okay, even though this is smaller now, on the small screen would be barely noticeable that you can drag it. So a little bit debatable what we want to optimize here. And I do consider it as a mobile application because you will use it when you are walking. So I'm gonna leave this mode on from now. Okay, I'm always zooming this, so for now I'm also going to put this zoom level to maybe 10. Yeah, this is, let's make it to 13. Okay, so now we are at city level. Most likely this is the type of zoom level that you would expect the user to be on, maybe even 15. So choosing the zoom level means less clicks if you choose it in a proper way. So since we are now focusing on where the user is and maybe where he wants to walk or cycle, having such a far away zoom level like this means that the user has to do more things. So guessing what is the default is also a step towards better interface. Okay, so this can be dragged, but how about can I create another one maybe by clicking the map that will be point B? So I want to have now a navigation between two such markers. I need to modify this a little bit. I'm going to have, this is already a very, very long function here doing many things, so I'm going to separate it. I'm going to say here add marker. And instead of having this global variable, we had it then for this Superman thing. But now we're gonna have something else. Okay, we will have maybe 2 markers or more markers. Maybe we want to give a more complicated path that goes through multiple locations. So I'm going to say here markers, and I'm going to say it's an empty array. And my add marker function is going to create a local variable here, this marker, and it's going to return it. So when I'm going to add the marker, okay, location could be actually as a parameter. So this has hard-coded location, Joensuu. I'm going to put it here. And I could call now add marker with Joensuu, and this should actually work. It should even work with Kuopio. And it can be just like that. There should be another one in Kuopio now. And both of them are draggable. But the problem is that if I do it like that, I lose the reference. So I'm losing the reference because it's being created here in the add marker. It's being returned, but I'm not using it in any way. So what I would like to do is say that. So now I'm keeping these references as part of this markers array there. And now I can more or less refresh the page, and through the markers I can get, for instance, the first one, and this is now a Google Maps marker. It looks a little strange because it's a complex object, but it does have options like get position and then LAT. So if I know the documentation from these Google Maps objects, it's just fine. It doesn't say A or B here. it's not really a big issue. So I think this is, I don't know if this has been since the beginning, but if I'm gonna put here label A, new. Okay. Well, it is there, but it's not very visible. I'm not sure if I like how this one looks. So the marker has this label option, but I don't know if it's really possible to customize it in any way. Seems to be something possible here. Notice I'm not always looking documentation like references on Google Maps or so on, because some of the things can be easily found elsewhere. Many people are probably encountering the same issues. Okay, I think it's slightly smaller. Okay. Oh, something at least. I believe this can be much bigger. So for this kind of screen, it's not gonna hide anything important if your goal is just to go from A to B. So we may redesign this. I'm gonna focus more on interface in the last lecture. So last one. Okay, but now both of them say A. So so if I want to change this label, can I do maybe markers, get the first marker, and now from the first marker I'm gonna say set options. So set options is a general method that I can use. Can I say here maybe label B? I'm not sure if it works. This is just memory. It didn't do anything. Yeah. I think would need to check. Of course, I could also create the marker initially with the label text as parameter. So maybe we do that. Maybe we do that. So here, add marker, it would have here label, and then the, okay, label text. And then this label text comes here as a parameter. So now my Joensuu would be an A, and Kuopio would be a B. This should work. Then again, it's probably not a good idea to still work with Kuopio because we are already going into the city level. So this is where we want to use the application. I'm going to put maybe a location like this seems to be center here. I'm going to put B to be in Noliakka, maybe somewhere here in Joensuu. And we would assume a real use case. This is a method. Okay, so I'm going to replace the coordinates with these. Noliaka. I'm not sure if that's how you write it, but somebody here can correct me. So now we have center and Noliaka, and I'm going to position the map on center, and the center will be A, and Noliaka is going to be B. Okay, some Joensuu is still used somewhere. Still some problem here. Oh, sorry. This label actually has to go in the function. It's the second argument. Amazing how JavaScript just lets me go along with that. Okay, so now I have the path from. Why is this not Noliak? Did I do maybe something wrong? I think that most likely what I did is that these were enough precise coordinates for city level, but probably I need this extra 9 here for street level. So let's see that. Just adding here another 9. No. Okay, this is very strange. Yeah. No, I have wrong coordinates, sorry. I was probably moving the A marker there, and then here I was getting no, I was moving B marker there, but here I'm getting the A marker's location, so it should be like that.
No.
Looks the same. Let's put 9 and 0. Somebody see what I'm doing wrong. This is very strange. If I put this to 74, yeah, this looks correct, but okay, a little strange. I'm just going to eyeball the coordinates by doing this. So I guessed the coordinates of Noliaka just by playing around. Probably some strange copy-paste or maybe some error in console. It is common sometimes that even if you have, if you're debugging, everything goes fine, at some point the consoles in different browsers can start to have bugs, can start to have errors. I don't know if this is what happened now, but in general, keep an eye on that. Like, it's a good idea to sometimes restart the console if you start to experience something you haven't seen before. Okay. I think we do one more thing now. We should, well, I would like this routing to update every time I'm dragging some marker here. So every time I'm dragging this, I want to see the new path from A to B. And after that, we start to think about this wind and how the wind affects the movement. Maybe we have a 10-minute break. Let's get back to this stuff. So I want to move the markers, and whenever I move the marker, I want to recalculate the directions, right? So I'm going to figure out marker Google map drag end, probably something like this. I'm gonna probably going to open the reference here. Okay, not enough samples. I could do it by just typing it, but I think it's still faster, even though I didn't find it yet. Doesn't work. You know, I could probably do the unthinkable. I'm going to open your exercises from last time because some of you, oh, not that one. Some of you actually had it working. Now I'm really wasting time, but it's gonna be worth it. Okay, yeah, this one. Thank you.
Yeah, but this doesn't use dragon.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it uses
dragon promises and.
Because I wanted to update the location dynamics.
Okay, well, I'm still going to copy that. So any marker that I'm creating will need to have some drag end added to it. So might as well add it into the add marker function here. Unmarker drag. Let's see. So unmarker drag. Well. Okay, so lat lng object coming from there. I actually don't really need to do anything with the properties. I could simply detect that the event is happening. And here I need to call get directions again, but I'm gonna get directions between the marker locations. So the two marker locations, I need to do that. So point A, LAT, Get position, something like that. Okay, and longitude. So this is 1 point, and the second one is the same, but but the second marker. So now I can do this, and hopefully it's gonna work. It's not working. So this unmarker drag function. Okay. Well, it seems to trigger here, so I'm getting a breakpoint, but what's the problem then? So it's now stuck here. I'm going to step over it. So point A is going to have some latitude and longitude, and B a different one, and then get directions from point A to point B. This should work. And then when the directions are received, they get added to the polyline. So for some reason, it doesn't work. So we get the URL, we get the GET request, and we even get response from the server. So what is happening?
Maybe there are too many calls because of the drag. Because
I thought about it, but it should still display the oh, it does. It does display them. Could be the reason. So I replaced this with drag end. I think it was the name I saw in the reference before. Okay. Well, something is coming, but for some reason the path is not updating at all.
Is it drawing it like again?
So it shouldn't redraw the path because the path has been defined as a global variable, and here what is happening is that it just gives it coordinates where to go. So for example, if I say here flight path, set path, and now I'm gonna give it so first element is that, and then something in Finland. So the path disappeared now, but it actually should be a long line from 00 to Finland. So this works. This command should update the flight path, whatever we called it here. I'm going to rename this variable to just path. but for some reason it doesn't work. So I'm going to debug again this onDirections received function and see if it really gets here in the first place. Okay, so this polyline path gets initialized and then coordinates they look okay. Ah, okay. This could be a problem. So one issue is here when I have this path, set path, this should happen after the for loop. I mean, in the for loop, I create this array here, but okay, this is actually not path. It should be named to polyline or something, because it's the Google polyline object. It's not the path object. Okay, so I will try to move this down. It could be affected somehow by maybe too many set path calls that happen in this for loop. So it's just a hunch, but yeah, I remove the breakpoints and try again. No. Okay, something is definitely a problem. Okay, yeah. It's still using the same points from the beginning, this point A and point B. So what is wrong here? So now it, after I removed this path from here and I moved the points elsewhere, it's still drawing the same initial path there. So this is the problem now. So that means that if I go back to the network, are the coordinates not changing? In my request header here. So
No. Or
yeah, so 29.75. It's not changing, is it? Why? I mean, this has parameters here. So here I'm getting directions between the center and Nolienka. But here I'm getting... Does this work, or is there some problem with this? Okay. So for some reason this function doesn't work. This is very strange. So it wasn't a bug before, it was actually... So here we are creating the marker. We get as a response from the function the Google Maps marker object. marker has even the drag end value, and the location comes from the parameter. So when I drag it, it doesn't change its location for some reason. This is very strange. I'm open to suggestions if somebody knows why this is like that.
Are we using the same markup reference?
Or is it like changing or
Because maybe if we are using drag and event on markup, so we need to use the same markup to get the location.
Can you repeat?
So when we are setting the event drag end on the markup, and when we change the location, so the coordinates get updated in the markup. And then we
I guess like when you using that add event listener, it is passing the reference to the different one. It's not giving you the actual marker. Sometimes it changes like that, I guess. Is it like actually getting the correct marker or not? Like when you say markers.0, is it actually referring to the global object, or is it like just
maybe
to the local this marker? So I'm not sure.
So you think it's some kind of copy here?
Yeah, could be
And then after it's moving, it's not anymore.
the same marker.
while getting the new coordinates, we need to use the same markup reference.
Is it like the same one? Well, not really sure.
Mhm. Okay, this is, I have to say, quite strange. So
This is
I have been using this many times, and this problem would not appear because this is the object that I'm
yes.
returning. So
Okay, so we're getting two markers and then pushing them back in there. And then we are adding event listener to each of them. Okay, I think it's pretty much okay then.
yeah, but it's very strange. I mean, okay, I will figure this out. It's probably one of these that takes half an hour. So before that, before we finish, I still want to teach you something. I will give you a little bit of things to think about, but more or less I'm going to show you something very interesting. This overpass turbo. So the overpass API is something that I have mentioned to you last time. This overpass API, it's more or less an API that can interrogate OpenStreetMap database. OpenStreetMap database you can download as a giant XML file, for example, or I think also some other formats. But this tool, this overpass turbo tool, can be used to query specific parts of the OpenStreetMap data. So here, what I have is an example that I actually wrote before. When I'm going to run this, it's going to give me buildings in the screen region. So this is now only data in the screen region. It looks like this. It's quite scary. This is now because I'm outputting in JSON format, but you can have it XML format as well. It's going to be the same result, but in more or less this different form. And these buildings have their geometry information with them. So they look like circles here because this tool decides to use circle if it's too far away. But now if I am zooming in, I see that, okay, this building has a little bit of a curve, of a angle there. And some of them are really complicated, like this. I'm going to use this in combination with the wind direction to figure out if there is shelter behind the building according to the wind direction. Now, the way I'm going to use this tomorrow is not going to be very high tech. Like I'm going to say some things. I'm going to say that if user is in the building, no wind. Okay, so it's actually possible to get routing in Joensuu through some buildings. For example, here. This is a street going through Isomy. You can go through the mall and escape the wind a little bit. So this is one thing that I'm going to use. Another thing that I'm going to use is that if the wind is going to blow from some direction, like let's say here it's coming from the east, then you're probably safe next to this building because it's gonna block some of it. Now wind is very chaotic. So wind now we could enter in fluid dynamics. Joensuu doesn't have information about the height of the building, but if the building is very low, it's probably not gonna block as much as a skyscraper. So this type of information could be used. And another thing that I'm going to use is forested areas. You may ask how I learned to type this command here for getting the building information. I didn't read the overpass wiki because it is huge. You can read it, of course, but it is very, very, very long, and this is just like the main page. What I did is I used this tool from here, this wizard. It's amazing. So I just went here, I said buildings. Build query. Okay, did you mean building? Yeah, sure. Build query, and this came out. And now I'm gonna say forest. No, this is not good. This is gonna find me offices for forestry. But forested area, maybe. I don't remember how I did it before.
Oh, it says you need to use quotation marks if your thing has the space in it.
Thank you.
No.
Land use forest.
Yeah, let's try that. Again, quotation marks.
I guess you need to use the equal to now. Yeah, land use equals to forest.
Okay, nothing here, but if I zoom out a little bit. Okay, so you probably know that if you go from Science Park to Noljaka, you can go through this forest area here. It actually continues quite far there, so here at some point it doesn't show forest because it's there are those bridges, overpasses there, but anyway. So this is the second thing that I'm going to use. I'm going to use if the route, whatever you intend to do, is going to go through these regions. So what we have to figure out in tomorrow is first fix that bug, and then how to call this overpass API so that we get this contextual information where the person is going, and we can safely say that in the forested area and in the buildings it's good to be if it's windy. But then we can also look a little bit also at the direction, maybe like if the wind is going through like if there is some building blocking from the direction. So these maybe these things I'm going to use here. And I'm not going to optimize probably the path, so I would need to modify, if I want to optimize to get the best wind free path from A to B, this becomes a very difficult research problem. It becomes something called an objective optimization problem, a multi-objective optimization problem. Because you want to optimize wind, minimize wind, but at the same time you want to minimize distance traveled. So it could be, for example, a way to go from here to here by just sticking through all these forested areas, somehow connecting one to the other, but it could mean a distance of 3 times as much. So then the question is it worth it? So I'm not going to write some kind of router solution that optimizes this, because it's tough to do. We need to put a weight on how important distance is and how important the wind is, and the wind scales with the speed. It can be very, very confusing. I'm just going to show on the route what are the places that are windy, and then you can play along with it. You can be a decision maker, like okay, play around, and then maybe you find another one where it's not wind. Otherwise, maybe I will even consider this, is it tailwind or front wind, or yeah. Okay, so this is just a sneak peek in what is happening tomorrow, and hopefully I figure out that bug until then. So something very strange is happening. Okay, but anyway, so if you have still questions, otherwise, see you tomorrow.